There are many things about Spyro that I love. The music, the controls, the environments, and everything in between. Also, I do want to add that Roccat sent over a free torch mic for me to use, and this is the microphone that I'm using in today's video. Thank you so much, Roccat, for sending over the microphone. A link to buying the microphone is in the description below. But today, I want to talk to you about one aspect of Spyro that I feel goes underappreciated: the level design. Let's talk about it.
Whoa!
What's up, everybody? My name is Canadian Guy A, and today we are talking about Spyro the Dragon's levels and why they are iconic. Spyro the Dragon was developed by Insomniac Games. However, this was only their second title that was in production, so the team that they had was incredibly small. Even though the team was small, they still had that legendary creativity flowing through the entire company that we all know and love to this day. Now, one of the features that Mark Cerny, who at the time was the president of Universal Interactive, wanted the team over at Insomniac was to create a 3D panoramic game with no render fog. That would mean that the game would render things at a far distance and not cover anything up with a fog, so that anything could be seen on the map at any point. This challenge was taken up by Alex Hastings. Mark Cerny actually tried telling Alex how to develop this idea. Alex took what Mark Cerny said, threw it out the window, and came up with an idea that was even better than Mark had imagined. Essentially, Spyro has 7 different render processes happening at once, showing different amounts of detail depending on how far or how close you were. This gives a classic texture shifting that you can see as you explore the world, something that's kind of nostalgic if you noticed it as a kid. According to Alex Hastings, the coding for Spyro and it being exclusive to PlayStation was key to its success, as having to optimize Spyro for more than one console would have been extremely difficult. However, even though this is very impressive, the technology for how the game renders is not what makes these levels iconic. Well, what does make them awesome? Could it be the environmental design? Now, Spyro's environments are one of the most unique in any video game franchise. At one moment you could be in a dark library, and in the next you're on a mountain with monks, dealing with a hungry and angry, Yeti. The sheer wacky and crazy design choices are all over the place in a chaotic but good way. Every level is different, vibrant, but most of all, unique. That was a huge problem with games back in the PlayStation 1 era. There were many different games that would have a very basic one-tone environment, to a point where if you didn't know the game like the back of your hand, you could easily get mixed up with many different levels. Spyro doesn't really suffer with that issue too often. Every level has an aesthetic that's unique to that level. But I would even argue that's not what makes Spyro's levels iconic. So what could it possibly be? While everything else I have talked about is extremely important and critical to the Spyro franchise and its levels, I think the magic that the game has is its use of space. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, some games, like Crash Bandicoot, are very linear. You go forward, beat the obstacles, and move on to the next challenge. But with today's technology, you could make as big and as long of a level as you like with as many obstacles as you want in between. Then you got games like Banjo-Kazooie. Big levels, lots of exploration, lots of collectibles, secrets, etc. And with today's technology, you can make entire worlds that are massive with so much to do with them. But Spyro does something different. While Spyro is 3D and open, kind of like the Banjo-Kazooie example, the levels are not that massive. In fact, they are relatively small if you think about it. But what makes those levels iconic is a smart use of space. Spyro takes a small space and finds a way to stretch it out and use the most out of it. Now, the funny thing is, these design choices were due to the fact of the limited power the consoles had at the time, having a restricted number of polygons, a restricted number of megabytes for the disc, and a restricted amount of memory. It turns out that these restrictions created such beautiful and creative designs that still work to this day. A great example for a level is Town Square. Town Square uses tiers within the same space to stretch out the gameplay. For example, the space with the first set of bowls you encounter is, I guess in a sense, the first tier. The second tier is up on the steps where you have to fly across the first tier. Then what was just once a wall turns into a platform on the third tier. But see how Spyro uses a small size of space and then can stretch the gameplay out when everything is used and has a purpose? It creates a really impactful experience. Now, some levels start to deter from this in the later games, kind of like, well, Zephyr, but even with one of the biggest levels in the franchise, it still has tier-based areas that make for an impactful feel. Another really good example is Idle Springs. It feels very linear at first, but in order to 100% it, you have to get to the end, climb to the top of the large hills, and what was once random pillars through the level turn into platforms that lead back to a higher point at the start of the level. Level design like this is genius and something that Spyro does very well. The other really cool aspect about this tiered use of space is that sometimes they're not so obvious to access, but they give the player a hint at some point in the level. Again, back to Idle Springs, you can see this chest on the ledge right at the start of the level, but you can't reach it. That should tell you that there is something on this level that can help you reach that chest to 100% the level. A classic example, Treetops. You can see where the last dragon is, but you can't reach it through normal means. That means something on the level is going to help you get there. That's where this dragon's hint comes into play.
Greetings, Spyro. For an amazing tour of the treetops, don't just stop at one supercharge.
Spyro's design uses a very smart technique that shows you that there is a secret on the level, but you gotta figure out the pathway. And it's very smartly done, it's very intelligent, and it is absolutely awesome. Some games hide outright completely alternative paths, and you won't know if there's even an alternative path unless you accidentally stumble across it or explore. But Spyro, like I said, hints towards there being something on the level for you to find. While the same use of space is important, the combination of everything that was mentioned in this video is the perfect mathematical pillars of level design for Spyro. Being able to see everything at any distance, unique world environments that stand out from one another, and the genius use of space. And if and when Spyro 4 comes along, these pillars should be followed to a T. When you think of Spyro, which level stands out to you? Comment below and let me know.